So I cannot stay on here very long tonight because I have a book called Veterans Affairs Whistleblower Retaliation to edit. But I wanted and needed and felt compelled to hop on here shortly because of more information in the news that has come out about things like this. For example, where they're basically saying 77% of youth, according to this Wall Street Journal news article, which they made look more like a social media post type deal, do not qualify for military service due to things such as drug use, criminal history, weight, health issues, etc., etc., etc. And they said back in 2013 that was only at 71%, so it was less than that. Now we're up to 77%. And the reason I mention this is because it's so interesting when they always say, they said it when I was in as well, that like, oh, it's less than 1% of all Americans serve in the military, and it's such a select elite thing that people make it into the military, serve in the military, and are in the military. Yeah, I observed and experienced and continue to observe and experience how badly they treat that tiny percentage of people that serve on active duty in the U.S. military or in any capacity in the military whatsoever, even in Reserve Guard, whatever the case may be. And that brings me to my next point of the maltreatment. Let's go ahead and get into it. And the lack of knowledge and understanding that the general media have on this topic and the general public, which is why I'm on here right now talking about this, sucking up all the oxygen out of my room right now to talk about something I feel like I've talked about for years. I have. And I guess I'm going to have to keep doing it because it seems like most people don't have the right information out there. Right here, Wall Street Journal says less than $2,000 is the amount of money that the lowest ranking people in the military are making. And then they say a bunch of hogwash in the bottom, which I totally disagree with, about how like, oh yeah, but let me direct quote. What the lowest ranking troops make a month, although pay is, get this, bolstered is the word they use, bolstered by benefits, including healthcare, food, and housing, leaving them few out-of-pocket expenses. Okay, that's just false. I'm just going to tell you right now. When I see the media make statements like this, it really makes me angry because this is false. This is false. It also upsets me when I see very, very youthful military wives making statements about like this as well, like free housing and free healthcare. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and start cutting this down right now. So when young military wives with a service member they're married to, which I guarantee has just joined the military and probably like 18 years old, 19, 20 tops years old, first term of service, 75% chance they won't be in the military after that first term of service because they're going to be running out as fast as they can possibly go because it's a raw deal and they know it. When they say free housing, it's not free housing. They take a massive chunk of pay out of the service member's paycheck, whether they're single or they're married, for what amounts to, for most part, substandard housing. It is not commensurate with the money that is being paid, period. This is all over the news media as well, how bad the housing is, exactly. I think this article even mentioned the substandard housing issue being an issue for recruitment and retention, okay? No one should have to pay for the housing anyways because taxpayers are already stuck paying huge bills to these government contractors to provide the shabby housing that they're providing. But then they feel the need to take even more money out of the paychecks of these service members, which is already ridiculously small, to pay for housing that sucks. They shouldn't have to pay for it. This is the world's most expensive housing and it's terrible. Okay, so housing, that's a joke. Food. So if you're a junior enlisted service member, which is what we're talking about here when they say lowest ranking service members, typically what happens is the food money is once again huge amount of money taken out of the person's paycheck every single month, and then they're forced to go to DFACS dining facilities on the military post, which typically is going to be near the barracks. They'll have one assigned, and the quality of these DFACS varies widely. I went to ones that were excellent. I went to ones that were just terrible. I went to ones where they give you all the food you want. I went to ones where they were rationing out food and wouldn't give you wouldn't give you food that you needed to eat. Okay, and by the way, you are paying for this out of your check. What issue I have with this is very much a human rights issues. There's a lot of human rights violations happening inside the U.S. government and certain federal agencies. So many of them, I don't even know where to freaking begin. But with the military, for example, I realized very quickly after I joined the military that I had made poor choice. because there's always a bait and switch. They say they'll pay you this much and they don't. Just like this information, this is misleading information. You don't have a choice if you're junior enlisted and watching out of where you eat, of how you eat, of when you eat, or of what you eat. In my view, that's a human rights issue. And if you're going to do that to people, you need to be informing them up front about this raw deal that they're about to embark upon instead of tricking people into it. You will never see, and I have never seen on one military recruiting advertisement, whether it be a commercial, a print ad from a recruiter, nothing about what I'm talking about right now. Not one time. Because if they're upfront about these kinds of things, people would definitely be more hesitant about joining, if join at all. Okay, because people in their right mind aren't interested in that. I was really fortunate that despite all the hell I went through, I was in a unit where my commanders, they were well-intentioned individuals, even if they didn't make the greatest choices all the time because of, honestly, competence issues. And a culture that's really toxic and unhealthy. But I was lucky enough to be in a unit where they gave me and the other junior service members in the unit all of our money back in our checks. The commander signed like an order to make it happen. So we got to choose where we would eat. But even with the money back in our paychecks, it was so, like, the pay was so pathetic that I remember scraping together change so I could get like a fast food side of food, you know, at like a local restaurant, like a fast food restaurant right near the military base. That's how low I was paid. I was paid so low. I was literally scraping together change. I remember struggling to pay a very slow car payment that I had for a vehicle that I owned prior to being in the military. I didn't have to struggle like that before I joined the military. I remember having to look at how I could possibly cut any and all expenses because of how little I was paid. As far as the healthcare is concerned, I really want to get into that because it says free healthcare. This is something I see, like I said, other people making comments about, which is false. There's no such thing as free healthcare. There's no medical malpractice on these active duty service members. I experienced that directly. There's a lot of medical neglect. I experienced that directly. I incurred injuries on active duty military service that went untreated and were neglected. They became permanent injuries and became worse because of the medical neglect and medical malpractice while I was on active duty in the military. Since then, I've been really fortunate to get to be able to, you know, be resourceful enough and lucky enough to get some health care and stuff. And no, not Veterans Health Administration, they suck. But that's a whole nother topic. And so I've been able to improve, you know, my own health that way, but no thanks to my time in the military. So when I see free healthcare, I get really irritated about that because I know that that is false. It is not what it seems. It's not like you're getting some access to some great healthcare. I was a very healthy person. I would call myself abnormally healthy when I joined the military, which is one of the reasons I was considered a great recruit because I was so healthy. And the healthcare I got, preventative healthcare, before I joined the military was superior to the healthcare I received overall when I was in the military. Now, I did get lucky. There was a woman's healthcare specialist that I did see for some things on a limited number of occasions. So I was very, 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 very lucky with that. But then, like I said, there was also a lot of medical malpractice. There was a lot of medical neglect that took place. And I was very young when I joined the military. I was 19 years old when I first joined the military. I was in the Air Force initially, then I was in the Army by the time I was 22 years old. And so I had a lack of life experience and was naive on a lot of levels. And I wasn't stupid, but I just lacked life experience. And so things like reporting healthcare providers to their medical boards for medical malpractice was something that was totally foreign to me. I had no conceptual idea of what the heck that was. If I had to do over again, being older and wiser, I obviously would have gone ahead and reported them to their boards because I do think their boards would have been very interested in two of these healthcare providers. One was a dentist and one was I think a physician's assistant, if I remember correctly, and knowing what was going on that military base. And I have absolutely no reason to believe I was the only one that got poor care. The issues have actually persisted since then, and there's been a congressional hearing and stuff where there's talk about making it to where the federal agency, Department of Defense, could somehow become liable for medical malpractice because there is so much of it. And it was really severe with one service member who ended up with a medical neglect, basically, in medical practice that led to him having a terminal illness that he later died from. And he was one of the people that testified about this. And so I have no knowledge of anything changing the Department of Defense where they're now liable for any medical malpractice at all. Honestly, when it comes to federal agencies actually being accountable for anything, just like the U.S. Department of Affairs, it's just kind of like a big joke. It's just like, accountability, what's that? And so, yeah, those are a couple things: food, housing, and healthcare. And, in the years since, I know things have changed. I would like to believe that some things have changed for the better. I hear anecdotal stories. Observe some different things. I'm still within, the military community to some extent, even though I avoid going on base whenever possible because I just don't want to. But I wanted to address that. And I also wanted to address, there's just so much whining going on right now from Congress in particular about the recruitment issues, which evidently are persisting. They're missing their goals by thousands and thousands. I think the number was like 15,000, but all these numbers keep being floated around. And they're talking about having to possibly shrink the military force overall in order to kind of adjust to the fact that people just are not joining at the rate they once were. Evidently, the Marine Corps, I think, barely scraped by and got their number of recruits. But all the other branches, even the smaller ones like the Air Force, are continuing to have issues. And there's a lot of different reasons for this. I could go on and on and on forever about it. But what I'd like to really point out, and is most striking to me, is that they complain about these people not wanting to join and stay in the military. Yet the people that join the military are oftentimes not treated with dignity and respect. A number of individuals. I remember, for example, when I was in non-active duty, after I got married, they were talking about Congress about wanting to cut pay for people that were active duty service members married to each other. Fortunately, that did not happen. But that mentality right there, we're trying to cut money from people that are already underpaid, whose bodies and lives are being placed at risk every day, is the kind of mentality that leads to the recruitment and retention problems we have right now. And yet Congress chooses to ignore that. There's no way they don't not understand that. They just choose to ignore it. And for generations, our government, the U.S. government, has treated service members and their families like expendable people. And then they wonder why people are like, you know what, I'm good. Like, I don't want to join that, or I don't want to stay in that. It's like, you have to reconcile it. You have to acknowledge that. And our government, our politicians refuse to. Another point I'd like to make is the complaints they constantly have about veterans. Like, they want to constantly cut earned compensation benefits. There's a lot of baiting and switching. The GI Bill, they bait and switch that. They decrease those benefits right around the time I got out. They're constantly changing things around with it, so you never know what's up or down. Utilizing it is extremely challenging. If you go online, which a lot of people would because they're non-traditional students, the people that qualify for this more often than not, they will cut the money that the benefits that you can receive in half, some of those benefits. And that's an issue. If you want to go to elite school, you can't, because you're going to have to pay out of pocket. You're probably not going to be able to afford it. The benefit won't pay for it, and they won't make the private school pay for it. And they should. It should be like, you paid for this for these few vets that are going here, or we're not going to give you public funding. That's what they should do, but they don't. So you're stuck basically, if you use a post the GI Bill, post 9/11 GI Bill, with going to public state schools that are, bottom basement price schools, and then whatever programs they have available. So it's super limiting. The service members, they were talking about cutting tuition assistance, and they actually did. I think it was in the Air Force at one point. I don't know if they've now readjusted that, but it's like, again, you're cutting from people who already have so little, and then you wonder why they don't want to stay or go in. It's like, well, why would they? There are also news reports, to include the Wall Street Journal I read, that show that military families are now saying that they don't want their children to go into the military, and that was a huge pipeline for the active duty military and the military as a whole. Evidently, I was part of that pipeline. And so they are very concerned about that, and they should be. And again, they need to reconcile how they've been treating the military for generations with how it's affected recruitment and retention now. So if that's not bad enough, the situation with just the way they treat service members, their families, military veterans, and community, the constant complaints about having to pay them and provide the promised benefits and compensation, and it just doesn't jive now with them whining about people not wanting to join, not wanting to stay in. It's like the reality is you should be grateful people are wanting to join or stay in. This is less veterans now you have to deal with, less service members and families you have to that you have to deal with, But you can't have it both ways. You can't have it where you want all these people to sacrifice of themselves, their families, their lives, their bodies, their minds, treat them like shit, and expect people to keep on wanting to join. Because evidently there's only 23% of the entire US population that may or may not even qualify at this point for military service. And of that population, most people do not want to join. So it's like, get a clue. Caring about the military community involves a lot more than just lip service. And that's what they've been providing for generations now, is lip service. And I think the lip service actually just began more recently. I feel like before 9/11, I kind of questioned how much of that lip service was even around. It seems like the lip service might be something new in my generation. I don't know. But anyway, so these are things I just wanted to bring up and talk about a little bit, because I'm seeing it in the news constantly, almost daily now. And it's just really interesting. And like I said, I mentioned earlier, I'm editing a book I wrote, which I've written over the course of almost a decade, called Veterans Affairs Whistleblower Retaliation. And that is a whole nother freaking topic. The federal agencies, some of them are just really bad. There was an article that came out that I read, I posted on my LinkedIn at GoVanessa, about the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, specifically Veterans Health Administration, taking away constitutional rights for some veterans because they have access to private information about them. And that is a really controversial topic. Certain lawmakers are contesting them doing that. The full-length article I posted on my LinkedIn is at GoVanessa. Check it out. It's a pretty disturbing article. And it just shows about the abuse of power that Veterans Health Administration can wield at any time, along with their Office of General Counsel or the lawyers, against the military community. And they do with their resources. And this is one of the countless reasons I do not go to Veterans Health Administration for my health care. And I really have been saying for almost a decade now, so after working at Veterans Health Administration, that the military community needs to have a choice about where, when, and who provides their health care, instead of it just being a unilateral choice made by the U.S. government and forced upon the military community eligible for this health care. Because taxpayers are funding this, and there's a ton of fraud, waste, and abuse. This money's not going largely to benefit the military community at all. Veterans Health Administration was saying that they were taking away this constitutional right for some veterans because it helps to prevent their basically adverse outcome, which I'm never going to say exactly what it was. You can read the article if you want to know what I'm talking about. And I thought to myself, well, the adverse outcome that you're trying to avoid, you're actually causing by providing subpar health care and maltreatment to the military community that's eligible for this health care to begin with. So anyways, that is it for tonight. I've got editing to do for a book called Veterans Affairs Whistleblower Retaliation that I'd like to probably never get through, it seems like. I think it's going to take me a couple more months to just finish editing this. But if things go well, I might have another illustration about good old Veterans Affairs to post, specifically aimed at Veterans Health Administration. So keep an eye out for that. All right, bye.